Hello Internet, my name is Vic. I've officially come out of the closet 3 times. Happy National Coming Out Day. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about coming out and the fear surrounding coming out. My name is Vic. I am 28 years old. Editing Vic here. You're not 28, you fucking idiot. You're 29. Like you just had a birthday. Carry on. And I'm a bisexual trans man. The very first thing I want to say is sexuality and gender are 2 totally separate things. I don't know why people still like to lump them together, but they are not the same. They are different. Sexuality is the preference in who you are attracted to. And gender is how you identify as a person and an individual. Trans is not a third gender. I grew up in a church, Southern Baptist style, so it's very homophobic. Growing up in that kind of household, back then when I came out, I for sure was not comfortable in my body with my gender that I was assigned at birth. I was not comfortable with that. I didn't in any way want to exude being feminine because I didn't connect with it. My brain just did not mentally connect with being feminine or a woman. Out of fear, I don't want to say fear of men, but out of fear of that stereotypical if you're a woman, you need to marry a man and start a family and all this shit that I'd grown up learning that I had to do, that was an obligation that was just passed on to me because I was born and assigned female at birth. And obviously the world has progressed since then, but the 90s were a very gender stereotypical, man does this, woman has to submit to man, which is also a very biblical viewpoint. There was a fear of coming out. Because there's the heteronormative, there's the, this is how shit's supposed to be. This is your blueprint for life. This is what you're supposed to be doing. And people just follow it blindly. Nobody really questioned why. Why do we have to do it this way? I was afraid to come out, and when I did, I received extreme backlash. I'm not saying this is going to happen to everyone. But when I came out, my family flipped the fuck out on me. I had 2 classes left of my senior year. It was my last semester. My parents just decided, you know what? We think that your interest in women sexually is because of the school you're attending. Which doesn't make any fucking sense. So they pulled me out of school. They cut off all communication with my friends. They took the keys to my car. And they basically were like, we're not fucking up with this one. Because I'm an only child. So they wanted these things for me that I didn't even want. I actually had to attend one of those conversion churches where you go to the church and the preacher or whatever used to be gay. And he prayed the gay away. And now he likes women. It really put a wedge between me and my parents. It was just so discouraging to know that my family was literally going to look at me different because of who I was attracted to. I could help that. When I was in my early 20s, I learned more about things in the LGBT community. I learned that transitioning is a thing. I was really interested in gender fluidity. Now, it's non-binary. Now, that's the thing about gender fluid. It's more about expression than actual gender identity. That's why it was really confusing for me at the time. And at the time, I actually as you can see, right here, I made a video coming out as gender fluid.
I've termed it something personally. I'm gender fluid. More on the masculine side. I'm gonna go by Vic from now on.
Now, obviously, at the time, I didn't want to be perceived as anything. I didn't care about which gender I was perceived as. I was just I'm just a person. I identified as gender fluid for I don't even know if it was a full year. I started doing more research into transgender. And I started learning about hormones and how you could get on hormone therapy. I started learning about the surgeries. I just was really interested in learning more because this was all crazy to me how you could do this. It wasn't even a year later I came out as trans.
My name is Vic. I'm 23 years old and I am transgender.
Coming out as trans was a whole different set of hurdles that I had to go through. I didn't start medically transitioning until November of 2018, but I came out as trans in March of 2015. So that's a big gap. But that gap happened because I had a lot of fear behind testosterone. There was a lot that I didn't know yet. And it's not that I was afraid of not wanting to transition after starting hormones and being this isn't for me. It was more of a fear of what if I start to transition and I get in there and then I lose the ability to access testosterone or I no longer can afford it. At the time I thought testosterone was just this unattainable magic thing that I just could not get. And I also wanted to go through gender therapy, which is something that is recommended in general. Not just to get hormones. I found out further down the line that Planned Parenthood offers hormone replacement therapy, and I didn't know that. I started doing gender therapy, and It was good, but then I started getting like really depressed, and I think I lost my job. So I couldn't afford my sessions anymore. I gave up. And I started going through like a spiraling depression. I was in a relationship at the time where my identity was invalidated constantly because the person was just, they didn't give a fuck about shit that made me dysphoric. So it just put me in like a really like shitty headspace. Coming out can be extremely terrifying because you don't know what you're gonna get. That brings me to some pointers on coming out from somebody who's had to come out a couple times. My transition is public, and that's my choice. Just because you come out as one thing doesn't mean you're going to be that one thing forever. Sexuality is fluid, but you can't help who you're attracted to. You can't control that, but it can change. A lot of people think that if you start taking testosterone, you'll be gay. Not to say that that hasn't happened. Have I ever dated a man? No. But I'm still attracted to men. And I think there was also a period of time where I was confused as to whether or not I was attracted to men or I wanted to look like that guy that I was attracted to. Turns out it's a little bit of both. A lot of it goes into play with my personal trauma and my personal experience with men is not that great. So it would be a sense of vulnerability if I were to get in a relationship with a man, and I don't know if I'm ready to like face that yet because trauma. And I was just like afraid to admit to being attracted to men because I didn't want people to perceive me as someone who's just confused. I think the only main reason I never like got around to dating men, which obviously now I'm in a happy, healthy relationship, so I'm not even thinking about dating other people. If anyone were to ask me, well, you claim to be bisexual, but you've never been in a relationship with a man, that doesn't mean shit. I'm still attracted to men. I'm attracted to both men and women. Bisexuality does include trans people because, again, I'm gonna say it one more time. You're gonna get fucking tired of hearing me say it, but I stand by this shit. Trans is not a third gender. So when you come out, you want to make sure that the people you come out to really need to be educated. And if they're not, it's okay to come out to them, but just be careful who you come out to. You want to surround yourself with a support system that you know is not going to be a negative influence on you or isn't going to bash you or belittle you for having bouts of confusion. And it is difficult to figure yourself out. A big tip is your family is not always going to be so welcoming and accepting. Coming out it can be treacherous and dangerous because you don't know. So it's very important to kind of do your research, figure out people's points of views on things before you just like blatantly outright be like, hey, guess what? As far as like me, when I came out as trans, I was 23 years old. Since being on hormones, I've gotten more of a clear head and a clear conscience and understanding that not everyone is going to be on board with it. That's 23 years of my life that my family and friends and everyone knew me as she. So it's taking myself out of that box and being like, hey, guess what? Nope, just kidding. It takes time. You can see the difference between somebody genuinely trying and somebody who just doesn't give a fuck and wants to hurt you or doesn't want to try. And sometimes it's really hard because you have to cut off a lot of people. And some people may be like, oh, well, they're blood. You can't just cut off your family. They were there for you when no one else was. Why aren't they there for me now? You can cut people off. You can make your own family. I think that's the beauty of being in the LGBTQ plus community is we are a community. There's a lot of internalized transphobia and internalized homophobia in there, and there's a lot that needs to be worked on in that community. Yes, I'm not saying we're perfect, but it's a community, and there are a lot of loving and caring and supporting people in it. Another thing that you have to be careful about coming out with is places of employment. There are still a lot of homophobic, transphobic companies that will fire you for those things. I know a lot of people are stealth where they work because of that. I'm comfortable with coming out. I'm comfortable with having my transition public on the internet for other people to see and hopefully help them through their journey and their transition because I didn't have all the resources that people have today. And I always wanted to be one of those resources because I never wanted anyone to struggle with that shit like I did because it was rough. And stay safe out there and happy National Coming Out Day.